This is Taylor Schaefer with Morgan James Publishing, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Bob Beltz about the upcoming release of his book, The Solomon Syndrome, a blueprint for a more meaningful and happy life. It is such a pleasure to have you with me today and connect with you for your interview, Dr. Bob Beltz. It is just such a pleasure, and thank you for joining me for the living room edition of your book launch. And I do have a couple of questions for you, so I'd love to go ahead and dive right into those.
Okay, let's go.
All right, perfect. So my first question is, what is the Solomon Syndrome?
Well, let me back up for a second just to give you a little bit of background. I think the subtitle of the book tells a lot about what the book is about, which is finding a way to have a more happy and meaningful life. The Solomon Syndrome is actually a problem that many people have that keep them from that. And I think that part of what I've tried to do in the book is, first of all, to identify the problem that keeps people from having the kind of life that's fulfilling, meaningful, and happy, and then to identify the solution. And the Solomon Syndrome is actually the problem. It's kind of funny that that's the title of the book. But to me, Solomon represents someone that sought to get his needs met in a way that really, I think most of us have been programmed from the time we're quite small and told this is what will make your life happy. So he was a guy that had tremendous power. He was a king of the United King of Israel, power that most of us won't have, unbelievable possessions, probably the richest man in the world at the time. He had, incredible wealth and just all of the things that we are taught will make us happy. And yet, when he evaluated all of that in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes over and over and over, he makes the statement, meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. And in a sense, then what I've tried to do is show how that many of us try to get our needs met, whether it's conscious or unconscious. We try to get our needs met in the same way that he did because of the culture we live in. And it's not the way that God really designed us to have a meaningful and a happy life. And so part of what the book does is it identifies the problem, and then the primary purpose of the book is to identify, well, what is the solution? What's the blueprint that God put together in order for us to have a meaningful life and to really be happy?
Right, yeah. And that brings me to my next question. What is the divine blueprint?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit different about the book, and it's funny, one of the reviews that's on Amazon comes from a friend of mine that's been a missionary in Africa for 40 years. So most of what's in the book isn't exactly new to him, but what he said the book did was that it kind of connected the dots in a way that he'd never seen before. I think most of us know that God has created us to live in relationships. And so oftentimes we'll go buy a book about marriage, or we'll buy a book about family, or we'll buy a book about friendship or whatever, or about our spiritual lives. What I began to see was that there's a way that all of those things connect to create, again, and I use the word blueprint, or paradigm. There's a way that God has created those relationships to connect, to really meet the deepest needs of our life for love and meaning. And so the book, in a sense, is a blueprint because it doesn't zero in on any one of those necessarily relationships. It takes them all and shows how they fit together and what the priorities are of those relationships, and then how we're really wired. When God created us, he wired us for that network, that blueprint to meet our deepest needs.
Mm-hmm. And who do you think the primary audience for the book is?
Well, it's funny because initially a lot of this came out of a series of retreats that I was doing with men. I talked about in the book my friend Bo Mitchell, and we were doing a number of retreats on relationships with younger business guys, most of whom were what you might call unchurched, some of them with no real spiritual background at all. And at the time we were doing those retreats, the audience was probably, men and women in their 25 to 35-year-old range, maybe that were just recently married or were just getting families started. These tended to be really successful young guys that, in a sense, had already bought into, again, what the book would call the Solomon syndrome. And we were trying to help them, see that ultimately that was not what was going to meet their deeper needs, and to try and get them to begin prioritizing their marriages, their families, their friendships. And so originally that was kind of the target audience.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the end of the book, one of the things that I do toward the end of the book was talk about the later part of life. I guess that's my age group now. And really there comes a time, we're told, in a lot of the research, a couple of really significant books that were written, that there comes a time as we reach a certain age where we begin to look back and evaluate and make assessments about our lives. And so that piece of the book, I think really the target audience for that can be anyone from that earlier age group all the way up through, senior, people that are in the senior age group. And so it's got a pretty broad spectrum there.
Right. Yeah, it has a broad audience. It's for anyone that's really seeking that more meaningful life. I love that.
Yeah. And the book is kind of split into two parts. I think that's one of the, things I'd probably like potential readers to know. The first part of the book, or the first half, I really call is about assessment. And again, it really goes into some scientific research, even in terms of the things that, how we function, why do we do what we do, how does our sense of self-worth and self-esteem all fall into that. And again, takes a good long look at Solomon, and then kind of transfers that over. But the function of the first part of the book is really, again, to identify, are you stuck in this, and then how do you get out of that? And it then goes on in the first part just to simply identify the network of relationships. And then the second part of the book I really call adjustment, because I go in and I take every one of those relationships, and then you give kind of a, not an extensive overview, but try to give some tips on, how do you adjust and get this into the position of priority, whether it's, again, marriage or family or friendships. How do you adjust your life in a way that those can become the kind of priorities they're supposed to be?
Right. Yeah. So really it is a blueprint. You're identifying the solution and then you're solving the problem and giving tips on how to go about doing that. Yeah.
It's just a bigger picture book,
right.
Versus, again, there have been plenty of books that have been written individually on these subjects. And I think that's, again, even what my friend was trying to say. It was like, well, there isn't really nothing exceptionally new in here about marriage, but the way that the dots get connected were something that sort of, to him, kind of made the light bulb go on. And that's what I really hope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new perspective, something else that shows them something else, something deeper. Yeah, that's wonderful. And where can our viewers at home connect with you?
Well, a couple of things. One is I have a website. It's pretty easy to find. It's just bobbeltz.com. And so again, and if you have a chance to see the book, you can go on Amazon. And if you just put my name in, Bob Beltz, it'll take you to that. But the website also has the other books that I've written, and it has access to videos of teaching and things. So that's one area. And then the other would simply be, I'm always open to emails. And my email address is bob@telosproject.com. That's a little hard to remember, but I think, again, if they go to bobbeltz.com on the internet, they'll be able to reach me.
Yeah, perfect. Simple and sweet. BobBeltz.com.
Yeah, very easy. My son actually put it together, so it's kind of fun that he had enough interest in all of that. So it
Yeah.
kind of accesses a lot of things that I've done. So
Definitely. Well, thank you, Bob, for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure. And thank you, everyone at home that is watching with us from your living rooms as well. And go make sure to check out Dr. Bob Beltz's book, The Solomon Syndrome. Thank you again.
thanks, Taylor.